Now, let's have a closer look at the concept of stakeholders and user stories. We discussed them a little bit before, but let's have a closer look. Now, a stakeholder is represents a broad class of individuals who have some interest or stake in the success or failure of the system. Okay, so the negative stakeholders are those who are interested in the failure of the system, or see that the project itself as a threat for them. So that could be something external like a competitor, or someone internal, that someone like would have workload extra, or someone that doesn't want to do a training for anything new. Okay, so people usually, when there is a change, there is a resistance internally, in addition to the risk that comes from outside, from competitors and so on. So it is important for you to consider these negative stakeholders so that you would assess the risk that come from them. Okay, so just have a look at who can pose a risk for your system, to keep them in mind in order to mitigate that risk. But the real, in the main stakeholders that we need to collect the requirements from are the positive stakeholders, the ones that are invested in the success of the project. And as we mentioned, there could be a lot of different types, not only the end user. Obviously, the end user is a very important group or type of stakeholders, but it can be someone else. It could be customer, supplier, like higher management. All right. Now, the users themselves are our focus here when we talk about the user stories. And now we need to look closer into who are the end users, what type of end users you may have, and what are the particular needs of these types of end users. Okay, now the user story is a functionality of the system as described by the actual user. So if you can get the end user to give you the user story by themselves, if you can get it from their mouth during an interview, that would be great. If you can't, you need to write the user story from the perspective of the end user. So you put yourself in their shoes and see things from their perspective, and the wording has to be done from that place. Okay? And it is supposed to contain simple sentences that aim at keeping the end user in mind throughout the process. Okay, you keep the end user in mind, put yourself in their shoes, and write the user story from their perspective as if they said it. Okay, here's the template for the user story. Now there are two aspects here: the story itself and the definition of done. So the user story itself, here's a template. You say as a, so now you are that. Okay, as a, and then you put the type of the user. I want, and then the goal, so that, and then the reason. So there could be I want, I wish, I would like, I mean, something to indicate that I need this. Okay, and then the goal, that is the action that needs to be done on the system, not a click on a button, not open a link, the goal from a particular action. Okay, so that, and then the reason. Now, it is very important that you know the reason, or you state the reason. So later on, if you cannot implement the goal as stated, you may suggest something else, or knowing the reason would help you meet the goal in a more efficient or a better way. Okay, now here are some examples of user stories. This is coming from Mountain Goat Software website. Now, if you go to this link, you have to just create an account in order to download the examples. I'm just gonna post the file with the examples on OWL for easy access, but anyone can download it there if you create an account. Now, here's an example user story. This is for a website. Okay, as a site member. So here's the type of the end user site member. I can, so that's like similar indication like I want. And here is the goal. Subscribe to an RSS feed of news and events. Okay. So it's not click on this link or open this page or click on this button. We're not talking about, this is not what we're describing here. There's the goal. So an action in terms of a goal, like I want to subscribe an RSS feed. Okay. And then here's so, okay, now the reason is coming. I remain sufficiently and easily informed. Okay, so I know the type of the user site member, what they want to do, subscribe an RSS feed, and why, in order to remain sufficiently informed. Now, if something happened later on and we couldn't implement the RSS feed for one reason or the other, we know the reason. They just want to be informed, so we can just provide an alternative way to get them informed. Okay, maybe an email notification or SMS or something. Okay, now here's another user story. As a site editor, I can assign priority numbers to news items. Okay, so here's another type of users, site editor. I can assign priority numbers to news items. So here's the goal. So here's a reason. I can indicate which articles I want featured most prominently on the site. And then they add a note. It's items are displayed on the front page based on priority. So I know who is the user or the type of the user, site editor, what they want to do, set a priority for news items. Why? Because they want to indicate the ones that are most important to be featured. Okay? Now here's there's an ordering of the priority on the front page, but I know that this is the reason that they want to feature the important news items. So if there's another page other than the front page that has the items ordered by date, now I know that they want the one with higher priority to be featured, so I can meet this like the goal and the reason behind the goal by featuring the item even though in a page that is not ordered by priority. Like feature them by, different font or different color or have them featured. Okay. So that's the story itself. It should be as simple as possible, as atomic as possible, and is coming from the user point of view. Okay. Now, when it comes to the definition of done, so that help guide the testing process. So this is the acceptance test. How can we tell that this user story is done? Okay. Now we are still in the requirement stage here. There's no development happen, but we state early on how this user story will be tested before we can say that this user story is done. Okay, so for example, this is not a standard or anything. This is just an example. Whatever way you come up, anything you come up with that would be acceptable to you and your customer, that this is how we know that, or this is how we agree that this user story is considered done. Okay, now an example of that, if these actions can be done on the system, so we can create an account, a member account. We can use the account to log in. We can subscribe to the RSS feed. We can receive the feed. So if all these 4 items tested and are working, we can check off this user story and say this is done. Okay, so early on we state the feature or the requirement and how are we going to test it. Okay. Now, there is some guidelines on what would be considered a good user story. It is summarized in the acronym INVEST, and this is suggested by Visual Paradigm. Visual Paradigm is a company that has a development environment that you can use. So you can create diagrams, and diagrams can generate the code automatically. So a software engineering environment. And they have this suggestion. Now, it's not a standard. Again, there is no standards. It's just suggestion, and it doesn't have to be perfectly met. It's something to aim at. Okay, so it should be independent. So self-contained in a way that allows to be released without depending on one another. So to use them as work items that help in the management of the project. You want to be able to release a user story by itself once it's done. Okay. Ideally, it's not always perfectly possible to have all the use cases independent. I mean, user stories independent, but it's something to aim at. It should be negotiable. Okay, so it only captures the essence of the user's need. The details are not supposed to be there yet. Okay, now when you add the details, you reduce the flexibility. So you don't want to reduce the flexibility so early on because you will learn about what actually needs to be done later. So with the way you set the user story should be as as generic as possible so that it doesn't limit the flexibility before we get the proper information that we can add the details. Okay, and it should not be written as a contract, as a legally binding contract. We just capturing the general essence of what needs to be done. Okay. Valuable, obviously, it needs to deliver some value to the end user. So we're not talking about anything technical, like from the technical point of view, from the interest of the developer. Sometimes we put requirements like the developer would want to use a particular framework or a particular a standard or a particular API or something. All that the user doesn't care about. Okay, so the user stories is what provide direct value to the end user. Estimable. Now we're going to talk about estimating the effort needed for the user stories later in the 3350 when we start the Scrum. But generally speaking, when you write the user story, it should be something that can be estimated. Okay, you should put it in a way that you can put a measure on it, and it should be small. Okay, it shouldn't take more than 3 to 4 days to be completed. And finally, it should be testable. So it should be something that can be confirmed that it is done, okay, based on the acceptance criteria or the definition of done that we talked about before. All right, now you can see more information about the user stories here, and we're gonna discuss it more when we get to the in-class activities. So see you then.